All right. Kicking this one off today with Derek Lacey. How we doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you? It's good to see you.
You too, man. Whereabouts in Texas are you?
I'm in Laredo, Texas. It's a border town just directly south of San Antonio.
Gotcha.
Yeah, small little community.
What did you, because you had gone on a little bit of a road trip around the time that coronavirus was hitting pretty hard. Where did you go?
Yeah, I went up to the western part of Texas, northwestern part, an area. There's a big park there called Big Bend, but I went to a town called Lajitas, and so it's in the Texas desert, very very remote place, and I'm sure you could go there now, even though things have changed a lot since then, and you wouldn't have an idea of what's going on globally by being there. It's pretty remote. So, but I mean, it's probably an 8-hour drive from where I am right now.
Gotcha. What
Yeah.
took you up there? Just wanting to get to a remote.
I went golfing with my dad. Yeah, we actually we were gonna fly out to California and decided to cancel that trip. We were gonna go on father-son golf trip and meet a couple of friends out there, but that was canceled. Like, it was right on the cusp of leaving.
Yeah.
It started to feel really weird, and then we got some I guess intel that the country may shut down, that flights would shut down, and people wouldn't be able to leave their state. That didn't actually happen, but it, we were prepared for that, so decided leaving the state wouldn't be a good idea, canceled that, and just made a little road trip out of it instead.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
How have you been with the entire pandemic, and how's that impacted you in your daily life?
Yeah. I've been good, and I've been grounded, which is something that I've learned through the years here recently in doing everything I do in my work and personal development. When something begins to appear off and I feel my nervous system unraveling, the immediate thought is to ground. So for me, what that was, coming back from this little road trip that you talked about, being disconnected and then coming back into, disconnected. I wasn't looking at my phone. I wasn't watching or listening to the news. And so it was really odd coming back into the atmosphere and then seeing everything that was going on, and how people were reacting, in some of the rules that were starting to make their way into our daily lives. And that's where I made my decision to ground and then be a leader and accept everything that I felt from the position of being a leader for clients, for connections, followers, so forth, so on. Anybody who I had contact with that wasn't grounded. And when that's the case, when you think of through the lens of leadership, then that's probably the most effective way to stabilize your nervous system. When you think about I guess jumping out of an airplane, let's say, not that I've done that, but that might, it could feel terrifying, right? But then when you speak to people that have actually done it, when you're in the process of it, it's exhilarating.
Oh,
Uh,
I've done it once, and it's very,
oh,
very,
have you?
yeah, yeah. It was tandem, so I didn't just flat out like, yeah, like it's
Yeah.
just me, but like that initial step outside of the inside of the plane was,
Hmm.
oh, we're high up right now.
Hmm.
So, but it was more exhilarating than anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's that difference, right? The difference that our thoughts create, that our imagination creates, versus the thoughts that our reality creates.
Mm-hmm.
And that right there, dividing that, I think has helped me. And that's when I combine that with the reality that my daily life itself hasn't changed much, because I work from home and I do a lot of my own cooking, and I grow food. So that's something that I've been wanting to do more of, just the simpler life anyway. So it
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't affected all that much from that. So combining that with a sense of responsibility to maintain like nervous system homeostasis, I've been really good. I've been really good. And um, but it I I certainly don't like what I'm seeing,
Mm.
but personally, I'm good, and I think that's important, because um, I try to do everything through the eyes of, I wouldn't say try. My intention is to step through consciousness with everything I do, and that homeostasis gives me access to the consciousness, which I I feel allows me to be a grounded leader and help other people. So that's how I've been treating all of this. This is a really important time. This is, I was speaking to a client yesterday
Mm-hmm.
who was struggling with some things, and I said, don't forget, you are also going through the toughest period possibly for human beings, like that the world has ever seen. And for some people, it definitely is. Some people aren't affected as much, but yeah, that's what's happening. That's what's happening right now. So
Yeah. And it's looking different. Like the effects are different than what they were in the past. Because I uh, I think one of the things that gets lost with all this is the whole comparison game of like, oh well, this isn't World War II or the Great Depression and like shit like that. And it's like, no, it might not be those things, but it's it's a global event that's impacting everybody. So it's still a very big deal.
yeah, yeah. And if you compare this to other world events, we didn't have the connection, we didn't have the technology that streamlines it all.
Yeah.
So this is just as big as impactful, in terms of sheer like energy and literal impact, atoms being affected, right? People, the stress levels, not the health, but like the other sick people that can't get treated because of hospitals restrictions. I mean, just the sheer impact of all this, physically, emotionally, psychologically,
Yeah.
is extremely intense, and it's felt everywhere. So this is the biggest event. When when something terrible like 9/11 happened, the world kind of became, there were a lot of people affected by it directly, but the rest of us that weren't became spectators. You know, there was immobility, inertia. You didn't know what to do, so you just watched.
Yeah.
And while that's happening now, there is that immediate impact as well. You know, almost everybody is, well, you're either wearing a mask or you're not wearing a mask, right? And there's an effect. There's a place that you're coming from in any decision you make related. Like you can't do anything right now that isn't somehow linked to what's going on. So every breath we take is influenced by this, and I don't think that's ever happened before.
Yeah, for real, man. And you know, a big distinction with 9/11 and what's going on now, it's like I felt after 9/11 that there was this camaraderie amongst the country of like, wow, all that other petty bullshit, let's put that aside. Let's appreciate each other. Like, this was just pure hate. This was devastating. Like, this was bad. Like, this is horrible. And while most of us were spectators, I think it gave us that pause to actually, you know, appreciate the other person. This has been very, very different, because you, like, in theory, it's like, oh man, like this thing that's affecting everybody in the world. Like, this is something that's affecting humans. So this could be a time for us to, again, put our differences aside, understand more components of humanity and being there for each other. And hopefully it shakes out like that in the long run. Hopefully we get more unified coming out of this. But the initial, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing unification. I'm seeing even a little bit more of a divide right now. Like, even what you're talking about, the whole mask thing, is just like people that don't want to have the minor inconvenience of putting something on their face to go into the store just to get the things and then leaving, and then you can take it off then. It seems like it's more people digging into their beliefs and being like, no, this is exactly how you have to do it, and fuck you if you don't like it. And it's concerning. It's a little concerning to me.
Yeah, and I get that, and I'm seeing both of it happen. I'm seeing divide, and I'm also seeing awakenings.
You know, that is true. I shouldn't, yeah, tip my hat.
Well, in awakening, divide is part of awakening. You know, I'm experiencing divide between friends and people in my own family.
Yeah.
Because of the like, I guess, call it upgrading, or the evolution of beliefs that are taking place. Like, I believe more than I did before. Forget about what I believe in. It's just like my beliefs have actually been reinforced or fortified. And when that happens, right, and I think that's good. I think that's a good thing, but it's going to create divide. And then from that divide, there is a reforming that takes place. How we handle the divide, you know, is the important thing.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because it's this whole. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'll
no, I think the only thing I wanted to say is that where we get confused is the intention behind the divide. Is that you wearing a mask, me not wearing a mask? We actually want the same thing.
Yeah.
We do want the same thing. And so you have to wonder, like, well, how did we get tripped up? How did we get confused or tricked into thinking that we are each other's enemy if we both want the same thing. And this has been happening in the world, in our country, since the beginning of time, right? There have been inner battles,
Yep.
and between people who want the same thing. And this is what I think the awakening is, what we're waking up to, is let's look further. Let's look at this from a deeper dimension.
Yeah.
And understand, like, what keeps happening here, what is going on underneath all of this that continues to pit us against each other. And that's what I think the important waking up is, where people could be standing up for opposing beliefs but still waking up to the same thing. It's like right now what's happening with the murder of George Floyd by those policemen in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Is and we probably aren't here to talk about some of this stuff, but when I some of the things that appall me right now is like a possible mandate of a vaccine, and I'm starting to see those as not much of a different thing, and I see the opposition that's created by these two concepts, and they're very similar.
Are you talking about what happened with George Floyd and what's going on with the vaccine? You're talking about comparing those two?
Right. I'm talking about comparing those two. But I'm not comparing them. No, I'm comparing the divide that's created by that.
Oh, the divide by those two. Yeah, and they're both happening at the same time.
And they're both happening at the same time. And yeah, so you start, this is what I think people are awakening. So in the process of awakening, right? Mm-hmm. We start having these debates.
Yeah.
And the debates they're polarizing, but they're in a way causing people just to believe in more than what they believed in before. But I think a lot of people are starting to see that, okay, things aren't, I don't really understand what I've always thought was the world and how it operates might be a little different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it might be a lot different.
Yeah. And anyhow, I know I'm a sleep coach. But
no, we'll definitely get to that kind of stuff. But there's something about this waking up that you're talking about that resonated with me, and it's this for the divide to happen, and then we got to figure out how to bring it back together. It's clearing out, it's opening the wound, it's clearing out all the gunk and the nastiness that's in there, and then it's putting it back together and trying to do it in a better way. It doesn't take away the scar, but we can make it better. And a big thing of what you're talking about is I feel like a large majority of people are being forced to figure out what they believe, and we've gone so far down this rabbit hole of this go mentality that we haven't stopped to think about what we actually believe in, that we haven't stopped to think about what makes us more human, how we can connect better with others, because it's just this, it's the rat race. You get plugged into the machine and you're there until retirement, and then that's it. And now it's like, all these issues that we have been kind of talking about, but not really actually discussing. We've just been voicing our frustrations. It's come to a head where it's like, no, I can't be half in, half out on this stuff anymore. Like I got to pick a direction that I want to go. And, you know, that's the nasty side of growth. Maybe not nasty, but it's the necessary side of growth.
Yeah, and you know, that's well said, because it reminds me like what all of this is. The force of belief is, I think it's the awakening into consciousness, and this is what 2020 is, and this is what I, for the last year, have been stumbling upon from just the different like spiritual teachings that I've listened to or been a part of. There has been this overwhelming feeling that like 2020 is when we ascend into a different plane of consciousness. And so when you strip it down to that, I think that beliefs are being challenged to step a little closer toward consciousness.
Yeah.
And so when you only look at it through the lens of consciousness, then you can start to challenge your own beliefs.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, I'm not sure where your microphone is, but it's a little like.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. And when you strip it down to that, and you start asking yourself questions, I think it's a little bit easier to establish what your beliefs are.
Yeah.
So you, like take any topic right now that's polarizing people, that's dividing people, and then we could do an inventory of consciousness. And that is how this tear apart that is wounded and inflated, or inflamed rather, gets healed back together, but becomes fortified as it heals, is when we heal it by adding in more consciousness that was there before.
Yeah.
So, you know, an example is like a beach being closed while a Walmart stays open, right? That is something that causes divide.
Yes.
So let's look at it through the eyes of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Through the eyes of consciousness, I see only or mainly how that is harmful to somebody's health, because we know the health benefits of sunlight, oxygen, you know, versus the detriment of blue light, electromagnetic frequencies,
yeah,
and inhaling other people's carbon dioxide. Right. So that is, you know, consciousness doesn't mean like value or positive intention necessarily. It just means to be conscious. It just means to slow down as much as you possibly could to really think, to be present with every single thought and action and consequence. That's what consciousness is. And I think we get ahead of ourselves, and, you know, immediately, because there's this rule, and it's like, oh, it's government imposed. I'm on this side. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I oppose those people. And then we get further and further away from consciousness because we're standing up for a belief that is being challenged to be upgraded.
Well, it's like the literal embodiment of asleep. Like if you're going about your daily life and you're making all your decisions based off of what somebody else has told you and not what you actually think or believe, you've never questioned that. Because there are some people out there that, you know, they're, when it comes to an authority figure, they're very just like, okay, I'm going to listen to you. Because I know that they're, you know, that's a big conservative type thing. It's like, well, if it's illegal, then it's illegal. And it's just like, But also at the same time, you got to understand that these aren't fixed. Like laws change. Stuff that was illegal is no longer illegal anymore, and vice versa. And why is it illegal in the first place? And like there's so many different questions that come into it, because I think ultimately a lot of times it's easier just to be told what to do. And it's a little it's difficult to come to your own conclusions based off of, you know, what's going on in the world, because then you have to come to terms with the fact that this shit doesn't work like you probably thought it did.
Yeah.
But let's get into the sleep coach stuff, you know, everything that you've been doing. Where do you want to start with this one? Just
Well, I don't know, but I'll say, you know, where yeah, it almost felt for a second like, well, what does this have to do with sleep? And it's the perfect lead-in, because that's what, you know, for me, my specialty is insomnia, not necessarily getting you to, let's say, go from 7.5 hours of sleep to 8.5 hours of sleep. I can certainly qualified to help you do that. But I help people resolve like complex problems that are resolved most effectively by an increase in consciousness, right? Like when you have something like insomnia, something that seems to be more than physical, right? Like I've, you know, in my past, I've been deprived of sleep for 48, 72 hours at a time and still couldn't sleep. So it's obviously more than something physical. And there's this, really, it's like, it's a romantic story of like your current self, or like your ego's interpretation of who you are, and then your higher self. And it's a love story where they're looking for each other, and it's consciousness that connects them. And so it's the stripping away of the old concepts, and then the collection of newer, better concepts that decreases the distance between that. And so, you know, we're in this constant questioning of like, what is the consciousness behind this thing that I'm doing? What is the consciousness behind this thing I'm believing? The thing I'm eating, right? When you start to see everything through the eyes of consciousness, then healing takes place. And so I think that the conversation is appropriate, because that's what I think my contribution to the sleep world is sleeping using consciousness as the vehicle, the mechanism. So that would, you know, that's something that an insomniac could contemplate and have a really good time with, and probably just ask themselves that question every single day, and by default they would be on a much better path. Only good things would come from that. So what I've been doing this a few years now, and what I've discovered is that there is very little consciousness in the paradigm that the world currently uses to sleep, or to heal people's sleep.
Yeah.
It's very conditional. It's too objective, and there's no sustainability behind it. Right? So you think about all the things that go into making a better world, a better planet. The same thing needs to happen with sleep. Sleep needs to be more green.
Yeah.
It needs to be more organic. It needs to have more love, right? All these things that it currently doesn't have. And when I say currently, I mean just going to your typical website, let's say a medical website that and typing in, how can I sleep better?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's evil behind it or anything like that. I'm just saying that it hasn't been looked at, in my opinion, enough through the eyes of consciousness. And through the eyes of consciousness, how would this actually be different? What would it look like?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do in like this system that I've created, the Art of Falling Asleep, is just taking what has been there already and make it more conscious.
I got you.
All the way around.
Yeah, because I think about the way that I used to fall asleep, because frankly, I started to look at sleep differently when I talked with you. When we first, did our podcast, and becoming more conscious about just sleep alone. It was this thing where before I go to sleep, it's like there's a bunch of lights on, I'm leaving the TV on, I'm probably setting a sleep timer, but that's about it. I'm not really I'm not thinking of I just wasn't conscious of falling asleep in a way that is going to be more efficient and allow for more rest, because part of what we think when we fall asleep, that's all we got to do. But it's just like, if we haven't been kind of like toning ourselves down, getting to a space where we can really relax into that sleep, like if we're tossing and turning all night long, that's really not quality. And one of the things that I've switched to is just like, I don't have the TV on anymore when I go to sleep. I close the blind, get it as dark as I possibly can in the room. Like I do the blue blockers, the Dormi's blue blockers, man. I mean, is when the sun starts to go down, I put those on. Yeah. The only reason I don't have them on now is because I'm enjoying this natural light from my window.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just it's being conscious about those things, man. Because I have actually noticed improvements in when I wake up. Because I don't always follow all these things. There's still going to be times where I'm not winding down like I could, and I'm not being as conscious as I could be. But then the next day when I wake up, if I'm feeling a little groggy or whatnot, it's like, I know why.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point you're making, because the most challenging things for people, I think, are things that you could do that you don't need to do. And this is what I see with, like with blue blocking, for instance, that most people, like you started wearing your blue blockers upon introduction to me, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. Like that concept. And you didn't have to do that because you slept okay. Like sleep didn't feel like it was controlling your life. Right. So it was extremely conscious of you to say like, oh, let me actually commit to this routine, this new habit of blocking blue light, even though I don't feel like it's not the most pressing concern that I have.
Right.
And right now, most people that wear blue blockers do it as an attempt to resolve like one of their bigger issues in life. But this is, everybody should be wearing them, because everybody's going to, like, if you're looking at light before going to bed, it's not a matter of like, well, I sleep just fine anyway. And there's some scientific reasons why you probably are sleeping what feels like it's just fine when you're actually not. But there, when you just look at it through the eyes of consciousness, like this is the most conscious thing I've ever committed to in my life. Like it looks really simple, but this is consciousness stripped down. So to actually stop and say, I'm going to bed soon. There's a television on, there's some lights on. I'm having this type of conversation, you know, at this quality level. Sometimes it's if it's not good, and you start to realize, like, this doesn't make sense with sleep. This doesn't make sense with what's about to happen.
Yes.
Right.
That's such a good point. Like, why are we getting so ramped up right before we're laying down?
Right. And, or more scientifically, why am I degrading my cells right before I'm trying to regenerate them?
Yeah.
Because sleep, again, we've learned to think about it as strictly a form of relaxation, which it is not. Relaxation is just something that takes place biologically on the way to it. But once you fall asleep, it's like it's a freaking nightclub in there. You know, it's like there's a DJ in your brain, and the crowd's jumping, and all the, there's all this momentum in there. It's quite intense.
Yeah.
And so we have this concept, though, that like, I need to be really peaceful. It's like, no, you need to be peaceful in the eyes of preparing the body to do its job, which is really intense. And so in adding consciousness, and I swear I don't get, like, $5 every time I say that word. It's coming up a lot, but really it's the most powerful concept in the history of thinking.
Yeah.
Because you can't get it wrong no matter what you're doing when you look at it through that lens. So when you start to really think about anything that you're doing that's not working or working, and you use that as the measurement, then you get to the source of quality, or good quality or bad quality. And so that's what you did. Like, you didn't need to improve your sleep, but you were conscious enough to consider what was happening with your sleep without blocking blue light, and you made a change, and it's had a dramatic impact on you.
For real. Yeah. The thing that after talking with you in the first podcast that we did, that I was just like, whoa, what the fuck, was the stuff around melatonin. Like, first off, I didn't know melatonin was an antioxidant. I didn't realize that's what it was. And you hear people like, oh, I have trouble sleeping, I'll just take a melatonin supplement, and that's like what you're talking about, like the unconscious response to it. It's like, oh, just take a pill,
Yeah.
it's fine. And it was through understanding that melatonin production starts when natural blue light is going away, because that's our body's response that we're about ready to go to sleep. And this unnatural world that we've built of this artificial blue light is keeping our body in this mode that it's still daytime, so we're not producing melatonin. So if you have all the lights on in the house, you're not wearing blue blockers, you got the TV on, it's gonna be harder to fall asleep, because melatonin helps you fall asleep. And then on top of everything else, just learning that melatonin goes throughout the body and like gobbles up all those free radicals and helps with recovery and inflammation. And it's like understanding like how the pieces go together. It's like, if you wear the blue blockers and if you're conscious about the artificial blue light that you're around going into, like, you're going to sleep soon, then it's going to set you up for your body to produce the thing that it needs to recover naturally. So you don't have to, just take that pill. And it was like, I can't not know that now. Like, so it's like, that was like a big thing from our discussion, that I was just like, holy shit. I had no idea.
Yeah. And without knowing that, if you have trouble falling asleep, you see how a mind that, you know, is just defaults to thought now gets caught up with a thought that doesn't feel so good.
Mhm.
And it's just the lack of melatonin that's giving you access to these thoughts, but it's the quality of these thoughts now that make you think that you can't shut your mind off and fall asleep, and therefore that's the issue. So let me try to treat that problem.
Yeah.
It's not conscious and it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
And so let me now take melatonin because I can't fall asleep, or let me do this other thing, or let me continue to just assume that I have some sort of problem. And so unconsciousness could, it just has this like exponential potential to affect all these other things.
Yeah. At
And
one point, I was taking NyQuil just to fall asleep. Like
yeah, I used to drink. I used to make soups of NyQuil. You know, like that was NyQuil was in my rotation. Like I had a rotation.
oh
Like a DJ has, like, you know, listen to Pandora and like songs repeat, you know, or whatever.
yeah.
Like I had a rotation of, you know, pharmaceuticals and Dramamine and NyQuil and melatonin and whatever else anything and everything
Yeah.
under the sun, right? So you're, and it's all a misunderstanding. It's just it's all a conscious or unconscious misunderstanding.
Well, talking about misunderstandings in the sun, can you break down some of the just the relationship between people wearing sunglasses during the day and to block that, and then, you know, not wearing anything at night?
Mm-hmm.
That can kind of play out because lots of people wearing sunglasses.
Right. And the reason people are wearing sunglasses, there was a study in the 1950s, I believe, and they did ran an experiment with mice who are nocturnal animals, by the way, and don't have skin; they have fur. So they sleep during the day and they're awake at night. So they weren't designed to see sunlight, but they did this experiment with UV light bulbs that didn't have full spectrum light, right? Just UV light, and these mice, you know, got sick. They got skin cancer, and so from that unconscious study, which, you know, it was unconscious because it just lacked controls, and there were no controls. They
Uh,
used the wrong animal at the wrong time in the wrong conditions, and from that developed this dogma that the sun is bad for you, so you should block it from entering your skin and you should prevent it from entering your eyes, right? So that's why people do that. It's like the only reason that I'm aware of as to why people do that. And so what they're doing in doing that is they're preventing sleep, like they're fighting sleep without knowing it. And the way melatonin is made is it hits the eye, and then it creates melatonin when it interacts with tryptophan. So that makes the thing that causes us to sleep. Right? So by wearing sunglasses, you're not allowing your body to print its own money, and then you end up having to rely on you know, borrowing.
oh
So
man,
that
makes me think of like the fat, like the anti-fat campaign. It's just like, ooh, fat makes you fat. And it's like, fuck,
yeah,
no, it doesn't.
it's the exact same thing. It's the
Yeah.
exact same campaign. It's the exact same campaign. And just like the other thing I talked about with the divide that we were talking about, it's like, this is happening again. We're divided again. What is behind all of this?
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, there's the one thing I know is that there is not, if you want to be healthy, if you want to be disease free, if you want to be alive, if you want to die of old age and have had sex the night before you pass and move on, then don't listen to the common advice coming from like government websites.
That's so frustrating.
It's
That,
frustrating, right? Yeah. And this is what we're waking up
yeah.
from, right? So
Yeah.
this is why I say it's a really amazing time despite the divide, because consciousness is winning, and we're going to come back to the same place upgraded.
Yeah.
But this is what we also need to do with sleep. Like, it's the formula is the same. And so the going back to the basics, right? Somebody listening who wants to sleep better is like, oh, you just get like, how do I do it?
Yeah.
Well, the simplest way is if you reverse that. If you don't wear sunglasses during the day, and if you're wondering why I'm outside right now, it's because I'm making melatonin. You know, I'm literally sleeping right now. That's what I'm doing. I'm daytime sleeping. So don't wear glasses during the day that cover your eyes. And we have all sorts of photoreceptors in our eyes, neuropsin, melanopsin, rhodopsin. There are all these opsins, and they all have these different functions. And but they're there to keep you awake and to create the ingredients, and make the sleep recipes.
Yeah.
And so if you allow your natural circadian functionality to do its thing, and then at night block the unnatural light,
Yeah.
whose frequencies mimic sunlight, but in a non-healing way, just in a stimulating way, right? Those same frequencies, like 430 to 465 specifically, start to tell your brain like, hey, it's daytime and you should be awake right now. Here's a little bit of cortisol. Here's a little bit of adrenaline, right? So the impact is profound if you just make that switch of letting your eyes see the sunlight, and then not letting your eyes see the blue light, the LEDs and the fluorescence.
Yeah. Man, that's a major switch. Like, it's a major switch, but it's a simple one. But like you were saying, it's one study can influence so much. And the way the propaganda, the way it's done, and it's like, yeah, which is why I believe it is necessary for us to wake up. Like it's been proven time and time again that we can't put our trust on these types of situations, because it's outdated. It's not. The experiments aren't done in a very ethical way, like especially the ones that you're talking about from back in the day. You know, they're probably better now than they used to be, but they're still bad.
What's happening is like, if they're done on behalf of Hummingbird, if they're done on behalf of an unconscious study and protecting that, then they're not going to improve. However, the ones that see the unconsciousness of that are going to make similar studies, or they're going to do research that supports the opposite, and that's definitely happening. But the ones that are supporting the low quality dogma are not improving, and because they're not looking for the right things. And this is why, you just have to question, why do you believe what you believe? And what's happened, this is what I've experienced as a proponent of blue light, is people want, I'll give a talk, and the questions are always like, what is the scientific proof behind this? And what's happened in this whole thing is people not understanding the difference between scientific data in science that can allow you to connect the dots versus proof of something. But all of a sudden, it's like, because of this poor study, the onus is on the conscious movement of, like, the common sense movement of getting sunlight and blocking blue light, right? And it's like there's so much energy put into having to prove how this is how not wearing these glasses is preventing sleep, and I'm happy to do that. But the because of that one unconscious study, it's that much harder to help people understand that the light that they're looking at before bed is affecting their sleep. And there are tons of studies, there are hundreds of studies that show that LED light it destroys melatonin cells or molecules,
Yeah.
and that it suppresses melatonin. That is all there, right? Like, there's so much, but you have to connect the dot of, like, okay, well, if that's happening, then obviously, if melatonin creates sleep and this thing blocks melatonin, then we connect the dots and say, collecting all this information, we can now deduce that blue light prevents sleep from happening. But that's still, the study doesn't show directly that the blue light prevents sleep. It's showing directly that it influences melatonin,
Yeah.
right? So the study, the real science is that it stops the melatonin, but there will never be, like, the science of you're not going to be able to run that experiment, access to those controls that take a bunch of people and you isolate them for years and prove that they're not, like, that's not ethical, right? So we have to be able to connect the dots, but it's so much harder to connect the dots when it has this foundation of this dogma that the sun is bad. The sun is bad has helped us, has made it easier to not realize that blue light is the real enemy.
Yeah, man. It's going to take a shift for sure.
It's happening. It's happening. Yeah.
I think it's happening too. Yeah, I mean, all we can do is continue to connect the dots, right? I mean, because there's going to be those groups of people and the thought process around, I don't want to think about it.
Right.
Like, I don't want to have to connect the dots. Like, I'm barely keeping it together right now. Like, I don't want to have to fucking connect the dots. So I think there's a major issue with that. And kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier is this go, go, go mentality, where it's like, screw you if you're tired and you think you have it bad, just suck it up because everybody else has it bad too. And it's when you operate like that for years or decades, and somebody comes in and is like, hey, you want better sleep? Don't wear your sunglasses outside, put on these blue blockers at night. They're going to be like, what? Like, I don't want to change my routine at all. I'm just trying to live.
Yeah, it's an important thing. I heard, I think it was David Wolf, the food guru, say that with every generation of technology, the society is sounds harsh, like dumbed down a bit, right? But
Mm.
it's not like we're getting dumber. It's just we're getting we're less willing to connect dots, and
Yes.
we want to see beginning, middle, and end. We want to see like a resolution with everything, instead of just taking this information, you combine it with this information, you're like, wait a second, oh my god, I see how they connect, I see how they're related. And that's what's happening right there, is like the combination of like the sun's bad for you with like everything's done right here on my phone, has combined to cause us to not support the thinking, the critical thinking, the consciousness of, that's behind connecting dots. And that's affecting people's sleep. It's affecting a lot more, but it's affecting people's sleep. The world, they say 30% of the population experiences insomnia. I recently gave, right before everything that happened, I was a guest teacher at a university here locally, and there are probably, I don't know, 60, 70 kids in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And 90% of them raise their hand, when asked like who gets less than 6 hours of sleep a night. And so what that told me is that the next time they do one of these censuses, we're going to find out that that number has increased. It's going to be more like 40%, eventually 50%, if something doesn't change, of the population that's sleeping like less than 6 hours a night.
Yeah.
And it's just like this reinforcement of technology, unconscious thinking, that is kind of dumbing down our sleep. So if the whole world started wearing blue blockers, they wouldn't just start sleeping better, right? It's just it will have a profound effect on how people think, how they operate, and the decisions that go behind, or the thoughts that go behind their decisions and their actions.
Sleep is one of the most underrated things in the health and wellness world, I feel like, because there's a large focus on like food and mindset and like all this other stuff, but it's just the way that we get efficient with all of that, like prepping our food, reading about it, learning about it, our mindset. Like if we're in a fog because we're not sleeping, that shit ain't gonna necessarily get done, or it's going to be more difficult. So to actually set ourselves up for success, one of the best thing, or like probably the best thing that we can do in life for our well-being, is get quality sleep. And it's crazy that's like, it's an afterthought a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to get into your sleep system. Mm-hmm. that you've been doing. Is this something that you're working on with your clients?
Yeah, it's something I'm working on. It's something that's developing. Like it evolves a little more each day, each month. And about a year ago, I was taking a bath, and I saw this like image on the wall of bullet points, and it just came out of nowhere. And I was just like, I saw these like there were these 5 lines on the wall, and it's like, Derek, fill in the gap here. Go through this process of falling asleep. Mm-hmm. And
were you on psychedelics at the time, or
I'm sorry?
Were you on psychedelics at the time, or?
Unfortunately, I was not. No.
Just in a relaxed state in a bath. No. It's like, huh.
I think it was just a culmination of, ever since I started doing this, there's not a minute that goes by in my life where I don't think about sleep, and I don't listen for the information that's being sent to me on it. And I've felt like a detective, like Columbo or something like that, walking around with a notepad and like a magnifying glass and looking at everything and trying to connect those dots, right? So I've been on a huge dot connecting mission. And so it almost has like a similar feeling to like throwing up. Like you feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up, but I can't, right? And like I try to make myself and I can't. That's what it's felt like for me these last several years. I'm like, I know something is developing inside me. I know there's a bunch of information, there's some insights, there's some clarity as it relates to sleep. There's something that hasn't been thought of that you that's being sent to you. And I've been waiting for this, and it's slowly, like, this is what it feels like with the art of falling asleep. And so I was bathing and I saw these 5 steps, and then I wrote them down in my head. I got out, I wrote them down on paper, and then I opposed them to the 5 steps that they were being upgraded from. And so that created this distinction of like, do these 5 things versus these other 5 things that you're currently doing, that the paradigm overall has trained us to do. And so I replaced that, and since then, you know, there's the 5 steps are a foundation from which we could go really, really, really deep. And the art of falling asleep has become a conscious movement to fall asleep, but it's also a lifestyle movement, and it's a spiritual movement as well. So it contains all these the emotional and physical and spiritual components. And so it's, you know, I think it's, for me, I'm enjoying it turn into something that's bigger than I thought. But it also, by following this, it takes us on a path to like personal growth and like energy balance. And it's something that anybody who wants to sleep better can use as a guide. And when you, no matter who you are, where you are on your sleep journey, whenever you feel stuck, there is some place in the art of falling asleep that's inviting you to come in and explore and just play with. So I really, and I say this all with, there are many ways. This isn't the only way, but I think this came to me as a gift to share with other people like me who really struggled with insomnia, or who struggle with insomnia the way I struggled, who feel defeated and have tried everything else. And some people are just more complex when it comes to their emotions. They're empaths, and they take on the feelings of the world. In times like this, they don't sleep as well because that energy, they collect that energy. And that's what this is. It's not for everybody. It's not to say that it's better than any other system necessarily. Some of the systems are really poor, but there are many great ways, many great coaches that have systems for sleeping. But this particular thing, I think, the way I relate to sleep, and when I speak, when I meet people, there is a certain percentage of the population that was just like me, very similar. And this is who this is for primarily, but I think anybody can access it, you know? Yeah. So, you know, that's on a more of helicopter view. That's what it is. But with each step, and the steps are decide, balance, release, become, and be present. Right? These are really simple concepts, and they replace complicated concepts that confuse people.
Yeah. The decide one is one that seems like it's a major one, because if you don't make a decision, it's going to impact the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you know, you see that show up with by decide. Everybody wants to sleep, but wanting is not a decision.
Hmm.
And sometimes wanting could be grounded in fearing not sleeping, right? So it's like
Yeah.
there's so many ways to break that down. But you know, being unsure, being unconfident about being able to sleep, all that's part of decision. So you know, decision um, is that first is that first thing. It's like it's as simple as putting your phone on airplane mode and wearing blue blockers, but it's also as simple as realizing that there is no reason not to sleep, like emotionally, no matter what the the fear that you're experiencing, there is nothing that makes more sense than to sleep in that moment. And we get and this is an unconscious or subconscious thing a lot of the times, right? Like somebody like me, some of my fears of sleep stem back from like experiencing violence as like a 5-year old, and that stuff gets trapped in you, right? So it's not as simple as saying like, oh, okay, it's easier. But when you break it down into a step like this and you start using tools that kind of use like surgical tools, lovingly use surgical tools, then you can get into these little areas and and not try to resolve a decision problem with like a melatonin solution,
Yeah.
right? So that's what the art of falling asleep does. Is you just really, it does that like on the phone. You expand things and you can zoom right in and take your time with sleep,
Yeah.
right? Let your insomnia reversal be a 3-year process if you need to.
Yeah, it doesn't. All these different processes and changes, and even going back to consciousness alone, this shit doesn't change overnight. Like you don't have the aha moments overnight. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why it's. I think that's one of the reasons why we're in the state that we are right now with consciousness is technology has progressed and a lot of like pharmaceuticals are being made and these comfort reactions to whatever we have out there. It's like it's such a quick fix in the form of like a pill or something along those lines that looking down the path of trying to figure some of this stuff out for ourselves without knowing what the end goal is going to look like and even realizing throughout the process there is no end goal, you know, that's that's not the more attractive, I guess, way to go sometimes for people who just want the pill.
Right. Right.
But yeah, man, it's so many different avenues you can take with these types of subjects.
Yeah. Yeah. And but it all comes back down to consciousness.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you know, what I want for people to do is be able to slow down, but also but if they feel like they can't afford to slow down, also have a way to do it. So like with the art of falling asleep, you could go through it in 2 minutes. You know, you could go through these steps. Like what does it mean to decide? Okay, i'm I'm deciding that nothing's more important than sleep. I'm putting my phone on airplane mode. I'm cutting my energetic ties with anybody or anything. That that right there can take 10 seconds,
Yeah.
right? I'm finding balance. All right, let me do a few yoga poses. Let me let me do some gratitude.
Yeah.
That will bring me into some balance, right? That's another 30 seconds potentially. You could do them at the same time, right? Release. Okay, let me do some stretching.
Hmm.
Um, Let me check in. What are the emotions that I'm feeling right now that could be preventative? Um,
Hmm.
and what is the invitation I'm receiving? What is it that I need to upgrade? what can I release in order to upgrade my belief system? And then you release that. You just take one little step, and then you become. What does it mean to become? It means that sleep is inside out. Sleep, we make sleep, right? The sun builds the sleep inside of us. We protect that sleep inside of us with blue light blocking glasses. We eat food that turns into energy, which turns into adenosine triphosphate, right? Which yields, which is energy, but yields adenosine, which tells the sleep clock that it's time to go to bed. So we could be conscious during the day of what we eat, and then at night recount what we ate, and really just kind of do a match, like connect the food that we ate to the energy that it made to the sleep that it created. Right?
Ah,
That's just conscious thought that's helping you become the sleep that you are. That takes another 20 seconds, and then when you've done all that, now it's sort of like running out through, starting a football game after you run out through the tunnel, right? With a bunch of music and people cheering you on, and you have all this adrenaline and you're ready to go tackle somebody. And it's just like that with sleep. It's like you go through these steps. It's just a form of calisthenics and preparation.
yeah.
So that now presence is the vehicle to fall asleep. Not let me relax.
Yeah.
Right? I got to let go. No, none of those things lead you to sleep. Those things that people try to do that are really hard to do, if they're done another way, all they do is lead you to presence. And then presence is what allows you, it doesn't even take you to sleep, it allows sleep to come take you. And when you allow sleep to come take you, now you're not waiting for it. You're not looking down the hallway or down the street waiting for the headlights to come, and now you are in concept with a biology of sleep, with a spirit of sleep, and you kind of evade time. You evade this concept of time, and you allow, and you suspend, and you become part of like a really beautiful process that feels really good to experience,
Yeah.
and it keeps your immune system healthy. It keeps your mind um, more conscious, when you wake up. So I invite you to try it.
Yeah. Well, I've felt the frustration before of wanting to be asleep, but not actually being asleep, of being like, man, I'm tired and I'm frustrated because I just want to fall asleep. But then it's going back to, just because you want something to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. Like, what are you going to do about it? And I also think that that's something that a lot of people can relate to, is laying in bed and being like pissed that you're not asleep, and then it seems like by the time you fall asleep, you wake up to your alarm 2 seconds later, and it's just this vicious cycle.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, you wake up 2 seconds later for real, and it literally is 2 seconds later, because when you sleep in that low quality state, now we talked a minute ago about evading time. Now time now time is like your enemy, and so it really does feel, it almost feels just as bad as if you didn't sleep, like it did no good.
Yeah. When you brought up time, like that's what made me think of that, because you really are looking at it in that through the lens of shit. Like, I'm only gonna get 2 to 3 hours of sleep tonight, and each the longer you go without sleeping, you're just like, well, that's even less now. That's even less time. So the more that you're focusing on the lack of time that you have to recharge and rejuvenate, you're not in the space of just allowing the sleep to take you. It's this struggle instead of a release.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of that, that frustration of laying there, um, what does somebody do in that moment? This is where people get stuck the most is, well, what can I do to fall asleep? And then sleep becomes a real effort of the ego, of the thinking mind, which now degrades the energetic quality throughout the body and all the chakras.
Yep.
The root chakra becomes ungrounded. The sacral chakra starts to experience shame. In the solar plexus, we're doubting ourselves, tied to the root as well. But we're not believing in the thing that we think we need to do in order to fall asleep. We're closed off, and we in the heart, and we start thinking about how this is going to affect us the next day, right? So the shadow
Yep.
takes over, and it doesn't even. We get so stuck there, then we lose access to the third eye and to the universe, the crown, through the crown chakra. So this is the most important thing about sleep is that it's not. We have to zoom out and not really think, well, just tell me what to do in that situation. And while there are things that people can do, I don't want to leave people stranded there. I just think it's time to take a more conscious look at it and realize, okay, let's slow down, let's back up. Because doing something and having something to do in that moment is not going to help you out in the long run.
Yeah,
it really isn't. And so we have to slow down and get better at decisions so that we can get better at release or becoming, right? And the presence. So when I think about sleeping better, I try to remove the idea of there being an answer and really more, and replace that with the concept of not, of keeping the ball in the air as far as the possibilities, the infinite possibilities, what's behind this, of what you can do in any way, shape, or form in order to sleep. That it's not a single possible answer, but it's just a collection of things. And when you can think about sleep that way, then the improvement of it is a little more intuitive and it's a little more sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a huge fan of doing something as much as I am a fan of becoming something. That's the replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Is instead of trying, we become. And there's infinite ways that we can sleep better. So to answer it, with one sentence,
Mm-hmm.
other than block blue light, because that's just nature. That's just that's a fundamental law. So it's time we be more artful with it. And I hope that helps people relax, just thinking of it that way, that they're not doing anything wrong.
Well, it's like you gotta find the right combination for yourself in order for this to work. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's basic things that you can do, like the blue blockers that you're talking about from a natural perspective. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
definitely do that, and that will help. But if my routine for going to bed is not something that works for you, then you shouldn't do it. Like, you got to find your own routine that's going to work. And I think that's the importance of this. It's not just, no, like, this is a step-by-step process and this will get you your exact thing. It's not. You get to play with it. You get to have some fun with it. You get to see what works for you and what actually feels good for you. You're not forced into doing something that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you don't want to do any of this, that is still your choice.
Mm-hmm.
We got to live with our choices.
Yeah. And that's what this is what I'm trying to create, is a way for people to have that, the freedom of personality and creating their own sleep system, but then having a structure to follow as well. So Ryan can go through these 5 steps in a way that's completely unique to Derek, that makes sense for him.
Mhm.
You know, there's so much interpretation in all of these 5 steps that you could try to do the same thing that I do to go through the process, but you also have your own way. That's why I call it the art of falling asleep. You know,
Ah,
you have a different belief system, different personality,
you know,
and different things make you feel a different way. You have a different daily experience that you could uh, look in the file cabinet for, you know, to find sleep
mhm.
in. You know, there's this conversation is for me, for instance, if there's somebody listening that can be impacted positively, right? Like, I could find this conversation in my file cabinet later and think about positive impact and use that as a reason to sleep, right? We all, like, but you can't, you may not have that same experience. You could, like, but somebody listening may not have that same file
Right,
cabinet.
right.
So yeah, it's really unique to us. It has to become artful, but at the same time, what do we have in common? All right, I thought it'd be an easier. We're all human, right?
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to go right into the
I'm like,
answer.
did we freeze? Did we
No, no,
freeze?
no, no.
But
Of us being human.
yeah, and it's light, water, and magnetism. That's
Yeah.
what we have in common. Is that there's a battery uh, that is built inside of us, that's created, and we're grounded to the sun and to the earth, and we have water like inside of us that we make when we connect to those things, and that creates a battery that will last for a very long time. And as long as that battery is working, then it's impossible. It's almost impossible not to sleep.
Yeah. Mm.
So so we have to we can't ignore the the laws of the world, the laws of God, the universe, but we also can't become copy and paste, you know, and um, that's why not every method is for everybody. Like something um, following the suggestions recommended to the whole, you know, created for the whole, isn't going to work, and that could actually keep you stuck longer when it doesn't work for you. So individuality is really important. Creativity, art, and when you follow something that has a biological truth, every step is grounded to a biological truth about sleep. Right, all of these steps that can have spiritual connotation and emotional connotation are all grounded to how electrons and protons and neutrons operate within an atom, within a cell.
Mm.
It's pretty simple when you break it all down.
All works together, man. It's all connected. And with that being said, I want to get into some 5G talk. 'Cause
Yeah.
because this is something that I know it's been getting it it's been getting a lot of buzz lately. You know, you were on this a while ago, and it's yeah, I know there's some conspiracy theorists out there that are talking about this. I know there's like people on both sides that are just like debunking it and trying to say what's real and what's not. So there's a lot of opinion out there. Where do you stand on the whole 5G situation today?
Yeah, I hate it even more than I did 3 years ago when I first was informed of it. I Going back to what I said earlier, the simple question: what's the consciousness behind it?
Hmm.
Why is it so important to have? I haven't come up with anything in favor of it that is more important than being able to download a movie in 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And when you remove all the prove this to me, prove that to me, when you just look at the, if we're right, if you're right and nothing's wrong with it, what's the benefit? Movie in 4 seconds. If you're wrong and it actually could cause cancer and destroy immunity and make you subject to every mitochondrial disease, which, cancer, diabetes, hypothyroidism, like anything you can think of, every disease that you can think of is a metabolic mitochondrial disease. So if you're wrong and these things happen, that's a pretty big mistake. And so that's the baseline for me. Why is it even there? And the arguments that I hear for, being able to, one of them right now, it's like, oh, you could to more easily trace COVID. I mean, that makes me want to throw up, so to link 5G with conspiracy theory, to me itself is irresponsible. Some people have talked about it causing like the virus, which I don't think that's necessarily true, but it just exacerbates low immunity. And if you're susceptible to it, then you're just going to be more susceptible to it if you live in a 5G city. So when you start looking at the data and you look at the science behind it, there's plenty of science. There's plenty of science that shows. You think about the science, like if you have cells under a microscope and you introduce them to a stimulant or stimulus, they have a response. Then that's going to happen when blue light enters a molecule. That molecule is going to have the same response if all else is the same. It's going to happen over and over and over and over again. That's predictability.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at the quantum physics of things, it gets back into the connecting the dots that radiation has shown to have a quantum effect on biology. Now we have to connect the dots, right? How much does the mainstream know about mitochondria and the degradation of mitochondria affecting the outcomes of health? They're not going to connect those dots because they don't know how to connect those dots. But instead, there is no study that shows that 5G is not harmful to health, right? The onus is on people to prove that it's harmful to health. And what they're trying to say is, look, I can't really prove that. I can't conduct that study. There's no time, first of all, to conduct that study. There's no money to conduct that study. And there's also no need to conduct the study, because what we're trying to tell you is that radiation has a profound impact on biology. We are showing this. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of studies, from my understanding, that show this. But what they're trying to say, and what I'm trying to say here, is connect a dot and also use common sense, right? Something that was invented in the last century and that has evolved to the point that it is now in the last few years, something that wasn't part of the original plan of the world and how it works. Using common sense, like, could that have a negative effect on biology that is grounded to light, water, and magnetism? So if you manipulate light, water, and magnetism, will it have an effect? And that's what you're doing. You're manipulating those three things, right? You're changing the light frequency. You're changing the magnetism, because now we're grounded to those frequencies instead of Earth. We lose our connection to Earth. You become grounded to the most powerful thing that's there. If you your car radio, as you travel, will pick up different radio stations as you go to a different city, because we become grounded to that frequency in that city. So if there's 5G in a city and you're going to sleep, now that 5G is going to be dictating the processes in your body versus the magnetism that's coming from the Earth, because you're grounded to that energy.
So 5G is basically radiation.
It's radiation, yeah. Yeah, they're taking the field, the energy field that exists naturally, and they're introducing unnatural frequencies that are very, very similar, but there's only so much room. And that's the big problem with 5G, is that there's only so much room on all these planes, these like megahertz planes, that they start to kick out these other things, these other molecules that are living there. And so 5G has the ability to kick out the oxygen molecule. And when it kicks out the oxygen molecule, then that means you can't bring oxygen in through your lungs, and you can't clean your blood, right? You can't filter. And so what happens? Respiratory. Yeah, and you guys, and that was one of the. I had several motivations when I moved to Texas from LA, but I gave myself. I'm like, you're going to decide on your birthday, because I wanted to be able to give a 30-day notice when I paid my rent, and my birthday was on the 5th of the month. So I'm like, I have up until the 5th to decide if I'm going to, and I was getting all this intuition to move back, and I was ready to make a decision. I mean, I'd already made my decision, but I guess I was just being dramatic with myself. And I remember the first thing I looked at online that day was that 5G is coming to LA, and I was like, bye-bye, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have it in San Diego. It's in LA, but right now, because it's like the first generation of 5th generation, I don't think, from what I understand, it's not crawling into the frequencies that interfere with oxygen just yet. And it could, I don't know enough about this, but it could probably go back and forth, and people, they could be testing it to see what the effects are. What they do with 5G, if a city announces that 5G is coming, that it means usually that they've been using 5G to test what's happening, to see what kind of effects it's having on human beings, so that they don't introduce it and then a bunch of people die of the flu, and then they're like, oops, and kind of caught red-handed for it. So they introduce it and make sure that I guess the biological impact is enough or low enough that it could be mixed in with, at least to confuse doctors and not really point your finger at it. So they have the potential to interfere with oxygen. I think maybe in some places it could be doing that. You just don't know. And that's why people, they're not necessarily, I'm glad that people are saying 5G is like caused coronavirus. They're not, I think it has the potential to destroy the cause or the movement, the advocacy against 5G, but it also got enough people's attention to become conscious about, why do we even have 5G, and do we really need to, does that make sense with the evolution of the planet when you compare it to the scientific data that's available of the negative impact? And it's causing more, just like right now, there's a number of deaths that COVID is like responsible for, And then there's the millions of people that are unemployed, the people that have committed suicide, and then the sick people that weren't able to be treated because they wouldn't be admitted. Like, I know people that have tumors that are just like in a like on hold. They're on the on deck circle, not being treated because the, hospitals are getting more money to treat COVID patients from the government. So you look at the at the at the good, the positive that comes from 5G, whatever somebody who believes that there is a positive for that would argue, and you comp it to the biological impact, the health of people and of the environment, the bees, the birds, all the things responsible for like the cross-pollination that gives us our food, that allows us to integrate light, water, and magnetism. And it's pretty freaky, really. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah.
I think it's terrible. I think it's not influenced by somebody who's in touch with God, whoever's idea it was originally.
I can see that. Yeah, because it's the first time I'd really heard about like adverse impact. Again, when we talked and we had done our podcast before, I've seen so many different like conspiracy theories around it, and at the same time, it's like one of my questions about it: do we even have a say in the matter? Like, is this something that's gonna happen regardless of whether we asked for it or not? Because it seems like it's one of those things. It's like, by the way, everybody, here's 5G, and it's like, oh, okay. Was I supposed to know that was happening? Is there anything that I could even do? Like, has there been any sort of study? If it does end up impacting such and such, are we going to roll it back? Like, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is where our conversation, I think, is leading us to. It's like every step of the way, that's what 2020 is, right? The rise of consciousness and the awareness that, oh, I do have a say in this. And in the past, it's like things happen and we just watch, right? Like we have that. We've kind of been trained to just watch. And now it's like, okay, I do, like, instead of just hoping that somebody does something to stop it, it's like, no, we actually can stop it, but we have to heal. We have to bond in consciousness and realize people that are more committed to the technological luxuries of 5G need to at least be informed on the dangers of 5G before they just say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, because it will be that improvement or the evolution in the consciousness as it relates to light, water, and magnetism that will bring us together to be able to say, like, no, please, you can't do this here. And there's a city, I'm blanking on it. I think it's in Massachusetts, but it's in the Northeast. And they recently prohibited, they got together, they signed a petition, and then the local government prevented the installment of 5G until there is a study showing that it's not harmful to people's health. And so that's a really big win. It's a really big win.
Yeah.
So we can do something about it, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity to do something about it here as we go forward. There's the 5G summit that's coming up June 1st on Monday. We had talked about that earlier, but the 5gsummit.com, you're going to hear a lot of experts, a lot of doctors, PhDs, like people that are experts in this field talk about the dangers of this. So we need to inform ourselves, because you will have the opportunity to say no. You know, you can go to your local government. You can write your local congress person, write your mayor, and say, hey, I'm really disturbed that we have this here, or that it's coming, and I oppose it. And then you can talk to your friends about it. And the real big problem right now is that we can't talk about it. Like, um, uh, if you post something about 5G, like I've done over the years, now it's now it's censored. So what does that tell you? Yeah, you didn't know about that, huh?
It's,
This
oh my
Yeah, yeah.
freaking Lord.
So what is, you start to connect dots. Why does social media and YouTube why do they want to prevent me from just speaking facts about the dangers of 5G? You know,
Because
has
5G
anything?
makes their platforms run more efficiently.
Yes, but
Maybe.
it's deeper than that. It's not the it's not the it's not the speed connection. It's the intention connection. It's the influence connection. It's like the people, the people that are running 5G are the ones that are supporting these platforms.
Uh,
It's the mentality, right? It's the matrix. They're all part of the matrix. And so if you try to step out of the matrix and warn against the negative influence of the matrix, then you're going to get censored. Yesterday, Trump signed an executive order to prevent some of the censorship. So I'm hoping that that changes, right? But in a democracy that makes decisions for the whole, for the majority, you know, as a majority, we have to, as a majority, be able to evaluate the pros and cons of 5G to be able to make that decision.
yeah.
And the reason that you didn't know some of the things that I'm talking about is because when you go through your Instagram and Facebook feed, people like me who are bringing it up are having their post deleted, right? That doesn't seem very conscious, does it?
No. Not at
So
all.
we that's what we can do is is uh, is is demand an even playing field and have conversations. And you know, anybody that you know that lives in your city right now is living under 5G, and if they don't understand, then they're all of a sudden, just like with the sleep thing, they are unconsciously acting out their life, trying to resolve the problems that they are having. And these problems are affected by their biology, right? Just like the lights influence how you sleep. But if you don't think about that, then you think you have a major psychological problem, and you know, you can't sleep because of a personality disorder. So you start taking a bunch of melatonin or pharmaceuticals because you have a sleep problem, when in fact it was just a biological stimulus that was creating that insomnia,
Yeah.
right? If you're living in a city where 5G, or a city like New York City where there's 5G, and then there's a bunch of metal everywhere with the buildings, and it's just like a ping pong
Yeah.
table, or a what's the machine, the with a little marble or the steel, I can't think of it, pinball machine.
Oh,
It's
okay.
literally like a
Okay.
pinball machine of frequencies. When you live in a city like that, now all of a sudden, you know, you might be experiencing things like anxiety and depression and insomnia, and you're like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I need to fix this. And it's like, nothing's wrong with you. You're just not grounded to light, water, and magnetism. So
Well,
it's such an important thing.
the norm is people think they're supposed to be stressed. People think they're supposed to be anxious. Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's going back to this mentality of the world that we live in, where you wear it as a badge of honor that you're stressed out to the point of ending up in the hospital. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's not how we're supposed to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're not supposed to get to those places. So I think those anxious states of consciousness are being reverse engineered in a way that's making people think that that's normal.
Yeah.
It's fucking
Yeah.
wild, man.
That's the new normal, right?
Yeah. I'm stressed. Are you stressed?
That's a part of life. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know, it's
exactly.
like, yeah, we're all stressed. Let's go get fucked up. You know, like
Right.
that's because like that's been the path, you know, for the majority. And it's yeah, it just, man, it comes back to connecting the dots. It comes back to being curious about this stuff instead of just reserving yourself to the fact that like I just have no say in the matter at all.
Mm-hmm. And that's what curiosity is, consciousness, and it all comes back. I'm telling you, this is my strongest belief ever. It's the one that's it allows me to sleep during any time. It allows me to have love, even though there's a lot of apparent hate, right? It's consciousness. If you come from consciousness, then you can't get it wrong, and you will see clarity in a debate that you have. Anything right now that is challenging your nervous system, take a step back and view it through the eyes of consciousness. Ask questions like why and what and how, and it'll be really hard to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll advance more gracefully with less resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the questioning, man. It opens up a whole new world. Oh man, I think that's a good place to start wrapping this thing up, leaving it on that note of just question things. It's the George Carlin, question everything. Like seriously, question everything.
Yeah.
See what it means to you. Like if you question something and you don't have an answer, like question your answer too. Is your answer there because it was your mom's friend or your cousin or the random person you heard at the store say that one time? Is it something that you believe or somebody else said that you never questioned?
Exactly. You know, when you add question everything, yes, and then through the eyes of consciousness, because through the eyes of consciousness,
yeah.
you aren't the judge and the jury.
Yeah.
And that's the important part, is to challenge your own answers to those questions.
Because you are allowed to have answers. You're allowed to have your answers.
And where there is polarity, there is resolve through consciousness. Because when you question through consciousness, then both people that oppose each other can find, you know, the same narrative that actually leads to advancement and evolution. What I'm seeing right now, people are fighting different fights, and that's great. We should all fight our different fights, but it becomes like this thing is more important than that thing. And if we step back through consciousness, we'll realize that we're fighting for the same thing, right? People that want a different president can step back and see we are fighting for the same thing. Only consciousness can do that for you. Yeah. And that's what 2020 is. It's the rise of consciousness.
Yeah. It really is, man. And that's such an enigma with this whole thing, is when you step back and look at it and realizing how many people on opposite sides of the spectrum just want the same stuff. And it's like you're just looking at it through a different lens. And it's like, is that really, like, that's what it's conscious. I know we've been saying it a lot, consciousness. But for us to have this break and the separation, for us to be able to come together, we have to be able to tap into this. We got to be able to tap into it and see that, while we might not have the same methods of going towards it, might not have the same like values, at the end of the day, what we want as human beings is very similar.
Yeah. A conspiracy theorist wants the same thing as whoever thinks they are crazy. And that's what we have to remember. And by the way, I put myself probably in the category of conspiracy theorist, but I don't, to me, it doesn't have any negative connotation because of the consciousness that's behind everything that I believe. And I don't believe, for instance, that the world, the way it is right now, the economy, the stress, the disease, in a world of consciousness, this couldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I agree.
And I think there is a matrix element to all of this that became the perfect condition for what we are experiencing now. And you might think that reinforcing the matrix even more is the way to consciousness, but and that's okay as long as you challenge that. Really, that's what I think. It's just challenging. I don't want to sound dogmatic, like this is the way you have to be. It's just really like, what if we did it this way?
Yeah.
However you end up, we can't get it wrong as a society as long as we take a step back. Yeah. And think if there is a more conscious way to do it.
Yeah.
How it's sort of like how can I make this stronger? Right? How can I make this stronger? We stop doing anything. We stop seasoning something. We stop turning up the volume on the stereo. We stop fixing our hair when we realize like we've come to the end of the road of how to do it better. Right? And so that's what it is. It's like, how can this be done more consciously? Can it be done better? And I think taking pills to sleep, I think 5G, social distancing, a new normal, a mandated vaccine, let's just say like vaccines versus building immunity naturally. All these things just make either conscious sense or conscious nonsense, Yeah. So I guess that's my input.
For sure, man. I get it. Yeah. I see it. I see it. I like it. I'm hoping that it is my hope, and I feel like we're shifting, even in the midst of all this separation and this the stances on both sides of the spectrum. Yeah, it's got to be shaken up to be able to heal. And thank you for your part in this whole thing. And if people want to reach out to you, insomniacs of the world, or people that want to see more information about blue blockers and all that fun stuff, how do they find you?
Yeah, they can. Well, my website is DerekLaceyCoaching.com, DerekLacey, and then there's a link there, or they can go to Dormis.io, Dormis.io, but spelled Dormis, and they can learn about blocking blue light there. But you can get a link from my site as well, and you could. I have an ebook there that you can download for free. I have a few meditations up there, some more coming. I'm working on building a site that is welcomes all who want to sleep better, not just insomniacs. But please go there, say hi, and start sleeping better.
Oh yeah, man. Thank you very much for doing this today, Derek. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it, people. We are getting out of here. See you.